Well, welcome. I want to welcome everybody who's joining us for Tree Talk with the Metro Tree Advisory Committee. It is lunchtime on the day after the 1 year anniversary of the horrible tornado that a lot of us experienced last year. And this is a perfect time to talk about trees and trees in Nashville. And today, Jennifer Smith has an important guest with her that I will let her introduce later. That's going to be able to give you more information and talk about various tree issues. And we're just so excited to see so many people joining us. I hope that you all have a sandwich or something that you're going to be able to enjoy during this webinar. And I do want to let you know, you're going to have questions. And when you have questions, I want you to go ahead and look down at the bottom of your screen. You're going to see the little Q&A box and click on that and put your questions in there. Most of your questions will be answered at the end of the webinar by our special guest and Jennifer Smith. But I want you to, as we're going through, don't save them to the end and try and type them in. Go ahead and type them in while they pop up, because we don't want you to forget. And the questions are really important. A lot of times, you get information, but without the opportunity to interact with the guests and the host of the meeting. And this is a great opportunity for you to put your questions out there and get them answered. So we're going to be starting here in just another minute or two. We're giving everybody time to jump in and join us for this webinar, the Tree Talk with the Metro Tree Advisory Committee. And Jennifer, I think you came up with the phrase Tree Talk. I think that was very good.
It's fun.
For those of you who don't know Jennifer Smith, she's been at Public Works for quite some time, is very knowledgeable, and helps us with all of our right-of-way tree issues. Excellent. We're already getting some questions. Put them in the Q&A. Excellent. Good job. This is exciting. All right. I think we'll go ahead and start. I want to welcome everyone again. My name is Sharon Smith, and I'm an Assistant Director of the Public Works Department here in Nashville. And I want to welcome you to this lunchtime webinar on Tree Talk with the Metro Tree Advisory Committee. During this webinar, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions, to drop them into the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Our host is Metro Nashville horticulturalist Jennifer Smith, who works here at Public Works and is also staff to the Metro Tree Advisory Committee. She has with her a guest today, which I will let her introduce. Jennifer, if you're ready, you're on.
Thank you, Sharon. Yes, it's my pleasure to have Neil Letson, who I've known for at least 20 years now. He came from Alabama. He was the state urban forester in Alabama, and that's when I first got to meet him and his good works there. And he retired in Nashville, and I've quickly connected with him and got him involved in the Tree Advisory Committee. And then he became our chair. And now he's moved on to be the president of the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you, Jennifer. Glad to be on the program today.
Yes. So a little bit about what's going on in Nashville. We have a lot of tree interest and a lot of great things happening right now. And the Tree Advisory Committee is about 37 years old, and it operates within Metro Public Works under the Beautification Environment Commission. Now, you might not be familiar with that commission, and each city council district has a beautification commissioner, and they work on all sorts of things from picking up litter to helping to identify areas where trees should be planted in their council district. So they're very, very valuable out in the community and help us just keep our city beautiful, actually. And then we also have the Root Nashville, which is a campaign, a citywide campaign, and all of us should join in their efforts. We're losing so many of our trees to the just development and old age. A lot of our trees were planted originally with subdivisions that are now 75, even 100 years old, and they're just dying. Not to mention, as Sharon was saying, the tornado, we lost a lot of trees. And the Root Nashville campaign is to plant 500,000 trees by 2050. It's a lofty goal, but it's a goal we must meet because trees give us so many benefits, from cleaning our air and helping us with stormwater management. So we need all of you to help participate. And when you do plant a tree in your yard, you go to their website and you map it. as an awesome individual. They have a category there, and you map the trees that you planted in your yard, and they'll count towards this goal. We also have some nonprofits that are very helpful in our efforts in Tennessee, Nashville. The Tree Foundation has been planting trees here for many, many years. They've really made big inroads into the schools. And in fact, yesterday we were out at a school in East Nashville trying to plant trees that were removed by the tornado. And the different classes came out, and after we planted the trees, they got to take the I'm a Tree Buddy pledge. So they're going to be helping to take care of those trees that are on their school campus. And this is just one way to get the younger generation to understand and value and appreciate trees. And then the Nashville Tree Conservation Corps is a newer nonprofit, and they've been really out there working as well. One of their projects that they've put a lot of effort into recently is the Shelby Street Arboretum. And if you drive down Shelby Avenue, you'll see this beautiful street line trees, and those were all planted, several hundreds of trees planted by volunteers, and it was a very impressive effort. And they're going to work to create an arboretum. In fact, Neil, we're going to talk about the Arboretum program, because that's a program that the Urban Forestry Council sponsors. So we'll be talking about that a little later. So all these groups are very important to our tree canopy. And then the next group, and I'm going to try there, there is the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council, and that's what Neil's here to talk about today. And I want to just make a note that I had the honor and privilege to be their executive director for about 13 years, and worked across the state with all the different cities and municipalities. And the things I learned from them, I was able to bring back and to this position that they created here in Nashville that I've had. And there's just so many people in our state that are interested in trees and that are making a difference on the local level. And we'll get back to the council in just a minute and their activities. Just wanted to also bring your attention to that we have a website, publicworkswebinars.nashville.gov, where we have cataloged the past tree talks. So if you're interested, we've talked about native trees, historic and specimen trees, so you can go there and look at past tree talks. And then one of my favorite things to do at these is to talk about our favorite trees. So this, Neil, do you want to talk about your favorite tree and why it is?
Oh, I didn't know you were going to do that,
yeah,
Jennifer, but yeah, I'll be glad to. Jennifer asked me a couple of days ago, just in passing, what was my favorite tree. And you know, Jennifer, you're the first person in my career that has ever asked me that. So I really thought, well, I need to ponder on this, and it didn't take much time, but the white oak kind of came to my mind, that it is a magnificent tree. And I thought about why I like it so much. And it's just the beauty of it, where it grows in so many different places. It's a native tree. It lives a long time. And, you know, the older I get, the more I want to plant trees that are going to be around for a long time, kind of a legacy thing. Well, this is what, you know, this is kind of the tree that it'll fit that bill. It'll live for hundreds of years. And then maybe even more importantly, Jennifer, it's what they call a keystone species. Now, I never had heard of that term before, but till recently, but it is probably the most valuable tree to support the ecosystem and the insects and other wildlife species than any other genus in the world. And the white oak is one of those. But if you want to plant a tree that's going to be around a long time, will have beauty and function, and will help stabilize our environment and our food web, you can't do better than the white oak.
Yes, it's the home to birds and squirrels and butterflies and moths and all sorts of insects. So yes. And then I'm just throwing mine in. The bald cypress, how fun is this? It's a deciduous conifer. So you see, even in the winter, it drops its needles, and it's native to the North American part of our country. And I just have always loved it. I'm not sure, you think it's a rough if you were to touch it, it's a rough tree, but it's actually very smooth. And it has these fun little knees that can, if you have it planted in a lowland area where it gets lots of water, it can create those fun knees. So I just have fun with that. And of course, I think the fall colors is spectacular. And if you have several in a row, it's like, whoa, you're driving down the road and it's, whoa, what is that? So I like those whoa trees. Okay, Neil, we're going to switch to your PowerPoint now. So I'm going to stop sharing mine.
All
and
right.
It's Neil's.
Let's see if I got the right one here. How's that?
Great.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jennifer. And Jennifer also said I could have a chance to talk about the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council. The ones that she's mentioned in Nashville, Davidson County are fantastic organizations. They're really meeting the needs at the local level. They're getting trees in the ground and doing so many good things. Tennessee also has a statewide nonprofit community tree program called the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council. And that's what distinguishes us from the localized nonprofits that exist throughout our state. But the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council is our state's oldest nonprofit community tree advocate in the state. It was formed in 1991 and it's had a storied history, and this is its 30th year anniversary, by the way. And as a sidebar here, one of the highlights is Jennifer Smith, who was, I believe, their first executive director, and who, as she reminded me, we met 20 years ago, which doesn't seem that long ago, when she cornered me at one regional meeting and wanted to talk to me about Alabama's program. And I learned from then on that Jennifer is a jewel, and she is a assertive promoter of urban and community forestry. And when I left that meeting, I was jealous that Tennessee had someone of her caliber, and also that they had an organization, the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council, which has done so much in this state. It's an honor and a privilege to be president and associated with these people. Well, let me move on now, if I can get my slide program to work. Who are we? The Tennessee Urban Forestry Council is made up of volunteers. We have no paid staff. We do have a paid contractor that we just hired, Ashley Kite Rowland, and she's going to follow in the footsteps of Jennifer, and we got great expectations for her and excitement about her presence to give us some stability. But other than that, we're basically volunteers that represent all the voices and the people that are interested in trees in our cities, from professionals to volunteers to educators, researchers, government folks, on down the line. You can see it in our board of directors, and you can see it in our membership. And that's something that we try to keep our eyes on, because we want to be relevant to all people in Tennessee, all backgrounds, all perspectives, all experiences, but all who share a passion for trees. That's who we are and what we want to be. What is our mission? We changed it in the past year to better, I think, define what our major role is. And I think you can boil it down into this statement: that the council exists to inspire and empower people to grow healthier urban forests in Tennessee. We don't want to be the ones that go in and plant the trees and do the planning, the maintenance, and that's not our role. We want to be a catalyst, an inspiration, a resource, a forum. We want to foster collaborations, but we're trying to do our job in knitting together all the active forces in our state's urban and community forestry under a banner, under a collective effort, kind of like teamwork. That's how we view ourselves. How do we do that? We do have several programs, and I'm just going to highlight these because Jennifer, we probably need to get into the tree ID fairly soon. But we do have some fantastic programs. All of them were started before I came on board, and all of them have met with great success. You may be familiar with our Arboreta certification program. This started, well, I can't remember, 2006-ish, something like that.
The Arboretum started in 98.
Okay, even further than I
Yes.
thought. And that was handed off from the Tennessee Division of Forestry to the council, and they've been running with it ever since. We certify 4 different levels of Arboreta based on the number of trees. You can go online and learn more about it, and we hope if you're not you don't have one, that you'll be interested in starting one.
There's about 90 of them statewide.
Isn't that incredible?
And I have to add this little
Go
story.
ahead.
When I was the director, I got a call one day from a gentleman from St. Louis, and he asked when we were going to list our newest arboretums on our website. And I told him, and I said, well, what is your interest? And he said that each year they plan their annual vacation to go look at our newest arboretum. So they are a destination to learn and can make a great trip.
Yeah. If you don't think trees can improve the economy, there's a great example right there. I didn't hear that, and I want to get more information later from you, Jennifer. Just kind of going down the line, the tree sanctuary program is designed more towards the homeowner that has 10 or more different tree species. We rebooted that program last year, and we've now got about 30 of them, but all you need is 10 trees, identify them, and do several other requirements in your certified tree sanctuary. Have a landmark historic and heritage tree program. These are the trees which have a connection with history or a historical event, people, or distinctions. Great program. Awards of Excellence, where we recognize 9 categories of people in the state who are the unsung heroes in urban and community forestry in Tennessee. I say we have done educational programs, and because of COVID, we're going to reboot those coming up, but that's another element of our inspiration and empowerment of people. And then an annual conference, which is they've had as many as I think 18 or 20 before COVID hit. We're going to try to reboot that probably in 2022.
You know, Neil, I want to encourage everyone
Yes.
to consider coming to this. It's very well done. You get so much information, and you also get to network with other communities and what they're doing with the urban forestry program. I attended a conference one time, and I got a call afterwards and said, would I write up a little summation of my conference? And I really did it just a little sentence, because I just said, you know, I love coming to these tree conferences because everyone there already gets who I am, and I feel right at home. So if you're a tree person, which I'm assuming you are, you come to these conferences and you'll feel right at home.
Absolutely. 2022. All right. So how can you help? Just like any other organization you have a connection with, you can join us through membership, volunteer your time, make a donation, support our programs. But even if you don't become a part of the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council, we want you to be involved with your community tree program at the local level. And Jennifer listed some great programs in Nashville, Davidson County. More information, there's our website. And hope you can visit it, and hope we can hear from you. All right, Jennifer, shall we get into winter tree ID tips?
I'm looking forward to this.
Okay. I was really surprised to get a call from her on this. Actually, it was an email. I'm dating myself because mainly people don't think about identifying trees in the winter because, you know, for 6 months out of the year, at least in Tennessee, you know, there's no leaf to be found on a tree. So we kind of ignore our trees and move on. But tree identification doesn't have to stop because it's winter or when leaves fall. There's still a lot of clues and things you can look for to identify that tree and to make you a better person as far as knowing the trees in your area or your community. Now, I will say that I'm sure there's a lot of people, diverse people on this webinar right now. I've met many of you, and there's quite a few in the state, Jennifer, that really know their stuff about tree ID. And in fact, that I learned from. So I'm not pretending to be the ultimate expert here, but I do want to say that we can all learn from each other. So whether you're a beginner or whether you're an experienced long-term dendrologist, I hope that you'll get something out of this that'll help you improve on your skills, and more importantly, that you can be inspired to learn more about your trees. So I always like to start talks with, kind of, so what? Why should we be interested in naming our trees and even knowing what they are that are around us? And I want to offer 3 reasons I think that learning our trees and what they are can be beneficial to us. Number 1, I think it can help us understand the natural world around us and our role in it. I don't have to say much about how we have become an urban state and more people are disengaged and disconnected from the natural world. And I think we can see the results of that and some decisions people make about our cities and growth and all kinds of things. And it's coming back to haunt us, that there is a great need for us to educate folks about the natural world. And this is one way to do it. Number 2, I think it can help us better care for our trees. Now, I know that a lot of you watched Jennifer give a talk last month. It was replayed again on the emerald ash borer in Middle Tennessee. Did a great job. It affects one particular genus, native trees, ashes. And we have a lot of ashes in Tennessee. So if you care about your trees in your yard and you're worried about EAB, the number 1 thing you have to be able to do is to know what an ash tree is. So this goes a long way in other kinds of tree care practices. Knowing the tree is the first step towards better tree care. 3, and I believe this, I think it helps us to become better people. I've been reading in my older adult magazines, to be honest, about the need to learn and to keep learning and just be curious about things. It keeps your mind sharp. Well, this is one way of doing it. If you take the challenge of learning about tree identification, and especially in the winter, that will really sharpen your tack as far as your mental abilities and whatnot. But it gives us a chance to do that. It also gives us, I think, greater confidence. When you learn a skill or a subject, doesn't it make you feel better about yourself and your confidence in who you are and what you can do? And lastly, in making us better people, I think it can help bring us together. Tree knowledge is the fuel that grows a community tree program. And there's so many people that are like-minded. If we have a common knowledge of our trees and how to care for them, we work better together in doing what's best for them in our community. So I wanted to share these with you because I think they're true and they are valid. All right, so where do we start? Well, the first thing I want to say is you need to have some resources and you need to not be afraid to ask for help. The person that goes out and just quickly and off the cuff identifies a tree with confidence is the one that's going to be made to look foolish. You have to be curious, you have to be humble, and you have to be willing to learn from others. And I wanted to show y'all these 3 resources just as an example of things that you might want to consider getting, or at least comparable items. And the first one are publications. You know, my wife and I we still order print newspapers, have them delivered in our home, and we're one of the few in the neighborhood, but we still like to read books and read magazines and newspapers, just, you know, from our generation. And these 2 publications are really pretty good. The one on the left is a fruit and key twig that was authored by Dr. William Harlow. And to give you an idea of this guy, he wrote a dendrology book when I was in forestry school back in the 70s. That was the Bible that we used. And that was based on his research in the 30s and the 40s. He was a wood technologist and he knew his stuff. But fortunate, and this was one of the books that my professor had us buy so that we went into the Smoky Mountains to identify trees. You know, we had something to help us. Trees don't change that much over the years. You know, we do, but trees don't. So this book is still valid and one of the best I have found on the market. I don't know if they still use them in forestry schools, but I still use mine. The other book is more recent. It's only 50 years old. And this is a winter tree finder that is geared more towards the homeowner or the generalist. The Harlow book is more for the forestry student and so on and so forth. But the other one is more for the homeowner. And it has a nice array of some images and some graphics, which is not just visual, not just text, but is also visual. But y'all might want to look into getting those. Are real cheap. Now, if you're under 30 years of age, you're into the electronic age and using resources of apps and other technology to help you. There are bukus of websites, apps, and so on and so forth. I can't list them all to help you with tree identification. I just happen to put this one from Virginia Tech that I use that's on my phone, because as you can see on here, I was able to list the woody plants of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. There's about 140 of them on there. And when I do the dichotomous key on my cell phone, it will generate potential candidates or the answers using the woody plants of the area I live. Now, if I go somewhere else, if I go to Memphis and I want to use my app, I just obtain the location for Memphis, and it'll spit down the common trees in that area. And then if I just not sure if I can get the answer from those two opportunities, I can send in pictures and descriptions to Dr. Dendro at Virginia Tech. They'll look at it and they'll try to give you an answer as well. But that's a real nice free app I would recommend. Okay, useful tools. You got two cheap ones and one very expensive one. But I would recommend that you have a good sharp pocket knife if you're going to go out in the field and identify winter trees, because you're going to do some slicing and cutting. And a 10 power hand lens or equivalent comes in handy when you're trying to look close at some of the minute distinctions. And then a cell phone, which has been very handy in taking pictures. When I'm not sure, I can take pictures of features and whatnot and look at them at my office, or if I send it to UT's Forestry, Wildlife, and Fisheries School, you know, they'll look at it for me or somebody else and help me to find, to identify it. But those are useful tools you can use. All right, we've got now I want to, let me look at the time here. Well, we're doing, well, we got about 30 minutes. I want to talk about the actual process of identifying trees, at least what I use in trying to identify a tree, whether it's in the winter or even during the spring, summer, or fall. And this has been helpful to me. It's a process, and there's 4 steps to it. Learn how trees relate to their environment. Step number 1. Step number 2, answer broad questions first. Step number 3, focus on what you can find and see. And then step number 4, practice, practice, practice. I am 69 years old and I'm still learning about trees to this day. I feel in many ways that I'm just beginning. Okay, so let's look at step number 1. Now, Jennifer and I talked about this with Jen, that we're going to give you a chance to interact with us. Y'all know about the chat box there, but I'm going to show some pictures and talk about it. I'm not going to name the tree, but I'm going to ask our audience to send in what they think this tree is. And this is our first one. So Jennifer and Jen, let's have folks, invite them to guess what this tree is. And then Jennifer, you can read them off in a second. But know how trees relate to their environment. Topography, temperature, rainfall, sunlight, nutrients, all of these influence where trees live and grow naturally. You know, these species and genera have had millennia and millions of years to adapt and to evolve to their sites, and they're changing sites. And this can be a clue towards a tree's identity, especially if you're in a natural area. For example, these wet sites that you're seeing here, that would be a place that you would expect to see box elder, red maple, river birch, sycamore, beech, water oak, sweet gum. It's because they are adapted to the soil moisture, the drainage, the sunlight, the fertility, and all those kind of things to make them happy where they are. Now, we'll make a footnote here. We see these same trees, especially red maples and river birch, that are planted in our cities indiscriminately. And if you'll notice, that a lot of these trees are having problems on our street right-of-ways, rights-of-way, and in some of the harsher environments. Not only should we know where a tree is adapted to, but we should take that into consideration when we plant those species in our cities so that we match their natural setting. Now, Jennifer and Jen, do we have any guesses on this tree?
Well, the bald cypress has been the top. And I think I showed pictures of the knees earlier. Sorry.
Yeah. You know, it's amazing tree, those knees. And, you know, these trees are adapted to an anaerobic setting where there's low oxygen. It actually makes them suitable for urban settings where you have compacted soils and kind of poor aeration. That's just understanding. Go ahead.
Yes, they do make nice trees, and we're looking to plant some more in the downtown area of Nashville. I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Can I say, Jennifer, that this was my second favorite tree?
Oh, well, white oak is my second.
There you go.
There you go.
We're mutual admiration society here, folks.
That's right.
Okay, now the second step is to ask broad questions first. It's so tempting to kind of jump at the first guess and say that's what, but if you can break it down, you can eliminate a lot of options and make it easier to decide what your tree is. And this is the broadest separation I could think of, just as an example. Is it an evergreen or is it a deciduous tree? Now, during the winter, that should be pretty easy to tell. Maybe not so much in the spring and summer, but this is just an example. And then here's some of the reasons why there's a distinction. And I won't go through those because they're pretty common sense, but it's just an example. Now, the next one could be helpful to you, or at least it will be more helpful to you in the winter in asking that broad question first. And that is the leaf and the branch arrangement. You don't have the leaves, so now you're going to be looking at the branching during the winter. And when I talk about the branching, I'm looking more at the twigs and the smaller, younger branches, not necessarily the older branches. Are they opposite or are they alternate? Now, I don't have a picture here, but I will later. But opposite branching on a twig is where the twigs are opposite each other on another twig. And there are three genuses that have this trait: maple, ash, and dogwood. And if you'll see, I've underlined the first letter of each one. And this was a tip that goes back to when I was in college. MAD. Just remember MAD. If you see branching that is opposite each other, and we'll have a visual later, and if the leaves are opposite, it's going to be it's 99% chance it's going to be one of these genuses. It's going to be a maple, ash, or dogwood. You're asking the broad question first, and you're narrowing it down. Now, look down further, and we can focus more on a particular genus, oaks. They have alternate branching. Now, a lot of other genuses or genera have alternate branching, but an oak also has clustered terminal buds. Okay, so we're narrowing it down. And if you find acorns, then you have all three, then you can assume you're dealing with oaks. All right, so ask the broad questions first. Remember MAD and remember the oak criteria to help you in the winter identification. Now, this is step number 3. Focus on what you can find. We're now to the point after you've gone through the first 2 phases is to actually, this is where you become a true detective, where you use your mental smarts, your deduction techniques and principles, and your knowledge and resources to really figure out and collect the clues and the evidence. It's just like Columbo on television. That's who you are without the hat and the raggedy coat. And there are several things you need to look at to find these clues. Number one is the bark. Now, Jennifer, here's number two. We want people to use the chat box to guess what this tree is here. But the bark is probably the most common winter ID technique. It was the one that we used when I was graduated from school and worked for Hiwassee Land Company, and we did some cruising in North Alabama, East Tennessee, and it was all hardwood, rocky. And the only thing we could use to identify the trees was the bark. And all they wanted to know was it a pine, an oak, or a hickory? So we didn't have to go much deeper than that. But it was very helpful, and it really made it quick to do our cruising. But anyway, it's very effective and efficient. Now, the bark, as y'all remember, is a protective shield or a sheet of armor for the tree to protect the water from losing the water inside and from freeze damage, and also from other vectors that might damage, an animal or other things that might damage the tree or fire. It's a very important part of the tree. But it also varies from tree to tree. You can have a shaggy tree like this, and you can have trees which aren't quite so shaggy. One thing to consider is that trees, the characteristics are varied. The variation of distinctions and characteristics is something you need to consider. For example, on younger trees, the bark tends to be smoother, and as it ages, it then develops this natural characteristic. And sometimes part of the tree will have this shagginess or distinction, and the top part of the tree and the branches may not. You got to kind of consider the age of the tree when you look at the bark. Jennifer, what do we have on the guess list here?
Well, most people have guessed the shagbark hickory.
Okay.
And then someone mentioned maybe could be the shellbark hickory.
Go ahead.
And that was the main.
Okay.
Main response.
And very good. It's a shagbark. And that's another thing to keep in mind. And when you learn about trees, is the common name, and even the scientific name can have a clue to a tree's identity, but that's the shagbark. Now, I have trouble with the shellbark and the shagbark, and someone smarter than me probably needs to talk about that. But the general distinction I get is the shellbark you find more on lower, more fertile, wetter sites, and the shagbark can be found on higher, drier sites. And also the shellbark may be a little smoother the higher you go up on the crown and the stem of the tree.
Now, we had someone that just said that they used to maybe refer to them as the scaly bark.
Yeah, different regions have different names for the same tree. It would be helpful in your tree ID work to learn the scientific name where that doesn't change, but the common name can from depending on where you are. Okay, now we go to a smooth bark tree. I'm going to go ahead. We won't have any guesses on this because I'm sure most folks can recognize this as an American beech tree. But I just wanted to show the extreme on the bark that you can find smooth bark, shaggy bark, and everything in between. Now, I will say that on the American beech, it does have these kind of elephant feet-like anchor or brace roots that protrude from the base of the tree, which is pretty characteristic. And you'll normally find this on wet sites. In fact, a lot of the species you find in the wet stream side zones have thinner barks than the higher elevation you go or the drier sites. All right. We're going to look this. We're not going to spend much time on this, but there are some things on the twig of the tree which can be very helpful. I just wanted to show you this diagram, and I'm going to highlight some of the terms. But this is where, if I could assign some homework, is where I would do it, is to where you would get a book and find this diagram and some information on it. There's a lot of it online, and learn about these terms, and then begin to apply them in tree identification and how these various characteristics are unique to a tree. And so we'll start with the probably the most common, if you can see my little arrow there, a terminal bud. At the end of most twigs, you'll find what's called a terminal bud, which is really the embryonic housing for the trees, either the leaf or the flower or the new growth at the terminal end. That's where it's sitting and it's resting, waiting for the right conditions to occur to leap out of the scales or the sheath around it and to send out a flower or a leaf. Now, you're going to see a lot of that right now in Middle Tennessee. I was walking on our street and all the red maples they planted, you can see the flower buds already beginning to become turgid or filled and ready to pop out so they can produce they can pollinate and produce the seeds to regenerate.
We hope we don't have a late freeze.
I hope not, but it's happening. Also, there's what's called the axillary buds or the lateral buds. And I've got those marked. Those are on where you saw the terminal bud, those are all the buds that are beneath the terminal bud. And usually they can be found by little knobs above the leaf scar. We'll talk about that in just a second. Now, in some species, Mother Nature kind of throws curves at us. There's what's called a false terminal. If you look at the axillary bud on the left or the twig on the left, you'll see that they call that end bud an axillary bud. That's because it doesn't have, how can I say this? It's the immediate bud above the leaf scar. If you will look at the terminal bud, you will see that it's above a leaf scar on the left, but there's a little axillary bud in between them. And that happens on the twig on the left, that happens with some species, and we'll look at a couple in a second, where the false terminal bud at the tip is actually an axillary bud. We won't go into more detail on that, but that's just enough to kind of throw a little curve at you. But also, if you understand that, it can be helpful in identifying a tree. And here's I found this picture, is really a great picture to show the distinctions of different terminal buds and lateral buds. They're not all the same, and they can be very helpful. Jennifer, I'm going to see if I can use this laser pointer. I saw you do it, and I'm going to see if I can do it. Can you see my laser pointer?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to start with the box elder. We know it's a maple, Acer, Negundo, and we know that it's opposite branching and leaves. And you can see the axillary buds here are opposite. That's what that means. It is very unique in its terminal bud and its axillary buds that they're a light color. That's all I'm going to say on that. Let's go down to the American Basswood. I saw one in Murfreesboro not too long ago, took a picture, and yeah, it's true. This is a false terminal bud. It's not actually a terminal bud, it's actually an axillary bud. And if you look at that leaf scar, there's no axillary bud between it and this one. So that is a false terminal bud. Doesn't really matter, but it's a reddish green and red color, very distinctive. Here we are down to the white ash. It has a more globe-like terminal bud. Remember mad, ash, there's your opposite leaf scars. Sugar maple, it's very pointed, and the two lateral buds next to the terminal bud are almost flat up against the sugar maple. Yellow birch, from Alabama, I'm not really familiar with this one, but it seems like a multi-color terminal bud. American beech, they describe it as a rolled up cigar. Staghorn sumac, look at the pubescence on the stem. It's also got a light color false terminal bud that's also pubescent. And then American elm, that shows you the distinctions. And once again, you do your homework, refer to references, look at the trees in real life. You can really develop a skill and an aptitude to look at just the buds to help you identify that tree. I wanted to show this real quickly as an example of the clustered terminal bud. That's the terminal bud there. Those are lateral buds around it. That's common to oaks. That's been very helpful to me. Okay, let's do a quiz on this one. Jennifer, what tree and what bud is this?
Okay.
How quick are these answers coming in?
This one's slow. Red bud.
What else we got?
Dogwood.
Okay.
Let's dogwoods, red buds, dogwoods.
Okay. Good guesses. It's a flowering dogwood, and this is the flower bud. Now we think of the bud being just for the leaf, but most trees produce their flowers first and get on the business of pollination, and the leaves come on. The leaves come on later, and this is just very you can't miss it on a dogwood.
Beautiful.
And also it can form in the winter by that frozen raindrop. Okay, leaf scars. Once again, we're just going to touch on this term, but this is where the leaf petiole from the previous year fell off. It leaves a scar, and within that scar are bundle scars. And those bundle scars are the remnants of the vascular plumbing where the water and the nutrients, the solutions could go up and down to the leaf. More importantly, where the leaf could send the nutrients down that it manufactures through photosynthate. But the scars are very distinctive on individual trees. So here again, look at your references, understand these elements, and then study the shapes and the distinctions to help you with your tree ID. Here's a picture of some leaf scars, 3 ash, native ash, white ash on the left, black ash in the middle, which we don't have in Tennessee, as I understand, more of it up in the north, but I don't know where some of our viewers are from. And then green ash on the right. Now, we've heard about the emerald ash borer, but it would be very helpful, and I'll tell you why, to understand which species of ash you have. Green ash is the most susceptible to emerald ash borer. It's almost 100% mortality when it gets started. White ash is not far behind. The one ash that's not on here, blue ash, which is native to Middle Tennessee and up north, research has shown 62% survival in a wooded area. It hits it, emerald ash borer, but the Forest Service and researchers say blue ash will survive. So you still we got a lot of blue ash here. And even though I don't have a picture of the leaf scar, it is the only ash that has a square twig. And I wish I had a picture of that. So my point being, know your ashes. The white ash here has kind of a smiley face. The green ash is more of a rounded globe that's kind of truncated at the top. Blue ash, don't have a picture, but it's a square stem. There you go. All right, we're looking at the pith. If you ever buy 2x4s at a building supply store, that little dark strip in the middle, that's the pith, that's the center of the tree. It can be helpful. Here are pictures of 2 native walnuts. The one on the left is a butternut or the white walnut. The one on the right is the black walnut. They have what's called chambered piths. The butternut has a chocolate dark chambered pith. The black walnut is a lighter chambered pith. So use your knife, slice the twig, and you can tell which one is which. Fruit and flowers. Not much fruit left on the tree, even though I saw some of the seed on a American basswood the other day that were still on the tree. But most of what you're going to find is on the ground. And with the angiosperms, these are seeds. Trees mainly deciduous, where the seed is within an ovary or an encasement of some kind, acorns, nuts. wing samaras, those kind of things. You can find those on the ground, but you have to be real careful. By the way, let's have some guesses on this acorn while we're talking about that, Jennifer.
All right.
But I want to have you keep one thing in mind when you look on the ground to find fruit like this is squirrels can be very unhelpful. I was under a sugar maple and I was trying to look for some signs of the seed, and I found a peach pit, a black walnut. I saw some acorns, and I finally found the 2 wings on a samara. So they can really mess you up. Just use your common sense.
We had Scarlet Oaks suggested.
Yes, that's it. We'll stop right there. See the little ring, concentric ring around the tip? It happens on most acorns. There'll be some of them that don't, but that person is absolutely right. Scarlet oak.
Neil, when we were working on some of the earlier arboretums and having to review the names of the trees, sometimes the red oaks, we had to come back when the acorns were there because they were so hard to identify between them.
You're right. And a lot of the red oaks will hybridize among themselves. It's amazing. Real quickly on this, we haven't neglected or ignored the conifers, but I saw this Virginia pine somewhere, and I just want you to look that even though the seed is gone, this is not a fruit. It's a naked seed that it produces, and they've already dropped. But if you look at the bracts, there's a little brown, if my color's right, rim around the tips. That's very distinctive of Virginia pines. So just another little thing that, there's all different. Now, how about this one? This is a conifer, and it's an example of a fleshy cone. It's an eastern red cedar. They have a female and a male. They're on 2 different plants. This is the female plant. It's the eastern red cedar, which is actually a juniper, not a cedar. And it's a fleshy cone. And it takes a long time to germinate, and eventually when it ripens, it'll spit out maybe 1 or 2 seeds if the birds haven't eaten them, and regerminate. But I think the wildlife do a better job of spreading this tree. It's a great wildlife tree if you want to, and we got plenty of it around here. Fruits and flowers. You don't normally think of flowers in the winter, but this is a witch hazel, and there's always an exception to the rule. We got a lot of witch hazel in Tennessee, and it actually flowers between late fall into mid-November, and it's the only native tree I can think of that does that, except maybe the September elm. I'm not sure of the September. I learned a lot of trees when I moved to Nashville from Alabama, so I'm still kind of picking up on this, but there are some exceptions to flowers. And I've yet to see one of these around here, but I know they're common. All right, unique features. This is kind of the grab bag, the mixed bag of things that don't really fit neatly into those other distinctions, but this is not a tree for tree huggers. It's a honey locust. The ones you see planted in our cities have been bred not to have thorns. They're thornless honey locusts. They still may produce 1 or 2, but this is what it looks like in nature.
Wow.
And it should be a very easy tree to pick out if you see these kind of tri-pointed modified branches. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Another unique feature. What you're probably seeing is this shelf fungus. It's a hoof-shaped kind of a shelf fungus called a crack cap polypore. Now, this particular fungus, it indicates decay within the tree, so you got a problem there. But it also is very common on a lot of tree species, but it's very prevalent and prefers one species in particular. And we have a lot of that around here, and that's the black locust. So if you see the deeply furrowed bark, but if it's accompanied by a wound or decay, and then you see these polypores, shelf funguses on them, that's a real big clue you got a black locust. By the way, the black locust blooms in April, mid-April each year. And that is about the same time that the adult beetle, emerald ash beetles, emerge from an ash tree and spend the next few weeks mating and then laying eggs in the tree. So if you see a blooming black locust, you know that the adult beetles are out there doing their thing. So trees can talk to us. All right, I want to look at shape here real quickly. This is a chinkapin oak on the Stones River Greenway. And there's two basic shapes to keep in mind. You notice there's no central terminal leader, and it's all kind of spread out in all directions. That's called decurrent branching. And the way I remember that term is when you draw that figure there, it looks like a D on its back. So that is decurrent for those that are interested in that term. And then on the other extreme, we have what's called an excurrent tree form, where you have a dominant leader like this. This is Jennifer's favorite tree, a bald cypress. And the way I remember excurrent is that is an excellent leader.
I like that.
You have to have little tricks to try to memory tricks to remember these things, because I can't remember. All right, a tale of two trees. We're going to go through two trees. These are real trees that I had to figure out what they were, and we're going to see what we come up with. Jennifer, this is in Nashville. Is it the Discovery Center? That marvelous facility there. You ought to go there if you get a chance. They want to certify. They want an arboretum and get it certified by the council, and they're just in the planning phases of figuring out what they have on their site and what trees they want to put in. They have enough already for a level 1, but on their map that they were given, this was listed as a sugar maple. And Nancy Murphy, she is an outstanding dendrologist. She was with me, and we looked at each other and said, that is not a sugar maple. What is it? It just didn't have the bark. Look how dark it is. So here we are. We go through a little process of taking a close look at the bark. And if you've seen a sugar maple, that's not what it looks like. The dark kind of chocolate brown, deeply furrowed, flaky bark. We got something else besides a sugar maple. Then I looked at the branch twig. And remember we talked about clustered terminal buds? That is a great example right there. You had that clustered, you had that terminal bud surrounded by the other buds and the tips. We knew we had an oak tree. You know, I think I jumped ahead of myself a little bit here. Alternate branching. It's like a stepping ladder here, one leg over the other as you ascend. And then there's your clustered terminal bud. Look more at the tree and we discover it for anything other distinctive. And we look at that branching. It's not a big diameter, only like 5 or 6 inches or less. And it looks like one of those winged elm trees. But, you know, this is not what a winged elm would look like. It's almost like shriveled skin to the appearance, but very deeply furrowed and throughout the entire tree structured. And then so I said, well, let's see what we can find on the ground. And I stepped on something crunchy and I looked down and I found this fragment or this shard of a acorn cup. And you can see the little fringe elements on the edge. And do we have time for someone to guess on what this is?
Yeah, we have time for this and then we're about out of time. So.
Okay. All right. Well, this will be the last. I have 2 trees, but. All
right. We could run through the last one if people want to stay, but we've had a bur oak.
That's it.
Yay.
Are we giving prizes to these people, Jennifer, or are you just gonna give them
we're just giving them good thoughts.
Okay. Bur oak. Okay. Jennifer, this is my last one. It's 1 minute till. Are we going to continue and those that want to stay on?
Yeah, we'll answer questions for those who want to stay on. Otherwise, people get off.
Well, thank y'all for those that have to leave. Appreciate you staying on and just get involved with your local community tree program. All right, this is at the Oakland Mansion in Murfreesboro. They have one of the nicest arboretums I've seen.
Truly, they do.
And so this is, this tree is standing here, and we're going to take a look at this. What is this? So we're going to start in the bark again. I looked at the form. I already showed that to you. It's kind of a decurrent style of form, not a strong terminal leader. And then we looked at the bark, and then I noticed that there's a bunch of what I call pecker holes from yellow belly sapsuckers all throughout this one particular area and in this black surface. And what we're seeing here is a yellow belly sapsucker. It's a native woodpecker, and I think it's the only one that actually looks to find trees with a high volume of sugary sap and will feed on the sap. Now, I believe it will feed on some insects and other things, but it's primarily literally a sap sucker. And so that's what we're seeing here. And it found a nice spot, and the sap has oozed down the tree. A black fungus grows on the sugary ooze, and it creates this black surface. And so we have our first clue here. And by the way, people can start guessing as we go through this. Next, I looked at the twigs, and here we have opposite branching. And remember the word mad, M-A-D. It's either maple, ash, or dogwood. I think we can throw out dogwood. Now we're looking at the terminal bud. And here, I really can't all I can say is, I looked at the bud and I looked at the books to verify what I thought it was. And I found that one tree had this type of a bud feature, where it was a pointed tip with the two parallel opposite lateral buds almost flat on the terminal bud. Just keep that in mind. While I was looking for fruit, not much luck. I did find what were two wings, Samara, and the two seeds were gone, either eaten or had something else had happened to them. I did make a mistake in this picture. They should be lying on their back where you can see the full diameter or width of the wings, but this is the remnants of a Samara, a two-winged or a Samara off of a tree, and we know a tree genus that has that feature. So what tree is this?
We've been having answers, the sugar maple.
That's right, the sugar maple. That was a tree that probably you could have told almost within a minute or two. But I wanted to go through these steps to show that even if we think we know what a tree is, you want to validate it. And that's what we did on this tree. We wanted to validate it. And when you validate it, it improves your diagnostic skills, but also expands your knowledge for other times of the year where maybe you find a tree that doesn't have the sapsucker holes, or maybe as a all kind of trees. There's a variation in trees where no two trees are alike, just like no two people are alike. And so the more we can learn and apply ourselves, the more successful and rewarding it will be. So the final slide, Jennifer, I want to thank them for sitting through this, but also go out and practice if you really want to be good. The Tennessee Urban Forestry Council certifies arboretums, and one of the best places you can go learn about trees is at your local nearest certified arboretum. You can find out where they are on our website. And I would also encourage people to start where they live, their home, their neighborhood, their community, but learn about the trees around you and you'll be rewarded.
Neil, that was great information. It popped up that they want more of Neil, so we'll have to keep that in mind for future tree talks. So Sharon, do we have questions?
We do have a few questions, and I just want to say this has been fascinating. I've learned things that I didn't even know I didn't know, which is always exciting.
Yes.
All right, we have two questions. The first question is question for Neil. Austin P is wanting to certify more trees in its arboretum, but not change levels. What is the best way to go about that?
If I remember correctly, Austin P University was certified in 2020. I don't remember the level. There's 4 of them, but there is a range of trees between each level. Let's say that Austin P was a level 3. Let me see if I can get this right. 1 to 30, 30 to 60. Okay, that means they had between 61 and 90 different tree species. Now, if you want to stay within that level, you can go up to, you can add enough trees to go up to the maximum level, which would be 90. Yeah, at 90. So maybe that answer helps. If it doesn't, go on our website, click in the question on our email link, and we'll give you more details.
And those certifications are good for 5 years, and then you recertify. So that's an opportunity at that time too.
Yeah, we did change that, Jennifer. It's now 3-year.
3 years.
Certification. But the point's valid.
Okay.
All right. Here's the next question, and I'm going to start off by saying I envy this person a little bit. I'm blessed to live Radnor adjacent and have still green vines growing high up in a few of my trees. Would that be mistletoe or something else? And should I be going after it to remove it while I can see it in the wintertime?
Jennifer, let me make a comment, and then you need to chime in. My first thought is I would get someone with some expertise to look at that tree with you, because the best way to identify a plant is to see it in person. And Jennifer probably has some people or resources she can refer to you. Well, the other point is mistletoe is a parasitic that grows out of, it's a sticky seed, produces a sticky seed that gets on a bird's leg, and the bird flies to a tree and it comes off on a tree limb. And if the bark's thin enough, it will actually root into the limb. So it doesn't get there by a vine. So if you have a vine growing up the tree, then you have more than likely have something else. Jennifer, do you want to add to that?
Well, I think that's really important to note. I'm seeing more and more tree covered in vines. And if I'm asked to say, what is about the health of the tree? I can honestly say quite a lot. I don't know. I can't see the tree for the vines. So that's something you really need to be aware of, is that if there is a split in the trunk or some fungus or something, you're just not able to see it. And then sometimes the vines are so significant all the way up into the crown that it's limiting the sunlight that the leaves are getting, and so the tree's not getting the food it needs. So I had a call-in question earlier asking about what do you do? And what we like to say is to take a swath about 2 to 3 feet and cut around. So you have your vine here and your vine here. It will take years. It'll slowly die from the top, but you really need to protect your tree, your resource in your tree, to protect it from vines. And I encourage everyone to go out and look at their trees in the yard now and start cutting back, even if it's just a little bit, because before long it'll just get high and high. I see it a lot in our alleyways and backyards where maybe people aren't paying as much attention to trees, but I encourage everyone to remove those the best they can. Don't, you have to be a little tenacious, but don't, of course, try to protect the integrity of the bark as well.
That's interesting. All right, thank you. Here's the last question. Which months of the year does bud identification work? Can you see the buds starting as early as December?
My answer is yes. And it might be easier to say when it would be the most difficult. The buds should be there throughout fall, winter, and early, I would say fall and winter, and some time periods during the summer. They will change shape, size, and all kinds of things. But when it's not that useful is right after the leaves emerge from the tree. And the reason for that is all the buds have been expended. except maybe for some lateral and auxiliary buds. But it's actually easier to see them and to use them during, I think, during the fall, winter period, because they're resting.
Good point, Neil. Thank you. Well, this is Tree Talk for March, and I just want to bring your attention to the Emerald Ash Borer presentation that will happen on March 25th. That's a Thursday at noon, and it's really important. We think that this season, when the leaves are supposed to come out, we are going to see a lot of ash trees that simply don't put the leaves out. And it's important that you as a citizen understand about the issues with the ash tree. What is your responsibility as a tree owner, and to get the word out to your community to help them understand. We think that we have about 1.6 million ash trees in our county. So it's going to be dramatic. And so invite people to come to our webinar so they'll learn more about what they can do to manage their ash trees. And we had a nice comment that was a great, Neil, that was a nice comment that came to you. So thank you again. I enjoyed, as always, spending time with you, and we'll see you next time on Tree Talk.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.